Hey everyone, Mondo Gonzales here in studio. We have our good friend Sean O'Rourke all the way from Australia to join us today. He has got some tremendous stuff on his website, which we're going to talk about. But to me, when we look at the world is in a lot of confusion. We know that the world is relatively secular and atheistic. But what is the facts? What's the truth? What's the evidence? And that's, in my heart, I always love looking at evidence. And so, Sean, here we are. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It's good to be here again.
So, for those that might not know about your site, which I love, talk about what you put together in your website, and then of course we'll transition into the video. But introduce yourself to the audience.
Sean O'Rourke, yep. I live in Australia now. Obviously not Australian. Born in Chicago, moved to California, and married an Australian gal, and now I'm here. So a little far away from home. But yeah, the website's, I don't know, I'm a mechanic, so I think cause and effect a lot, and I think evidence, and come from a family of doctor people. But yeah, I need proof. I love watching documentaries, and I love looking at God's creation, and just I'm in awe by how things are made. And I just want to, every time somebody says it arrived by chance, my mind just short circuits, and I'm like, please explain that. Like, how do you think things like the electron transport chain or a flagellum or the universe or the solar system arrived by chance? Let's consider the odds and see what is actually there, because I don't think so. I can't believe people accept it. They don't look. I don't know. They must just turn a blind eye.
That's exactly what I see too. Is my brain works that way. I like things very much in order. I understand that's how I came to salvation, was looking out. Again, I love astronomy ever since I was a kid, and thinking in those terms, and asking, wait, how did we get here? What do you mean there was nothing, or there was a singularity? Where'd that come from? I mean, we can always kick the can down the road, but before we move on, the name of your website.
It has been written.com. It's got a rung of everything. If you want to see tangible evidence, it's there. It's got 3 pages of creation material, the history of the writings. It goes into prophecy as well. And there's a lot of math that you can't ignore there. As much as I love math, I don't. You can't ignore it. It's an honest language. It's the only one you have to leave it out to get dishonest answers or not do it right. But like, if you go look at the math of these things, like, when was Daniel's prophecies written? When did it come true? How do we know that? Like, go examine it all and know, if somebody asks you or why you believe what you believe, you have an answer to give them. So that's what the site's all about. And I just needed it for reference. So no matter where I was, I can't remember it all. If you want to know a detail, I can go right back to that site and say, oh yeah, the silver amulet scroll was found here. It dates to this. This is why. And I just try to keep it current, and have a lot of your guests around there, like Joel from Joel Kramer.
Joel Kramer. Yep.
Expedition Bible, I think. Yeah.
Yep, Expedition Bible. So that's the great thing about it, is not only do you have science and technology, you got Bible, you got the Bible text, but you got archaeology, prophecy. I mean, all the things that we look at, and we would ask again, what is the evidence? One of the things I find fascinating, and then we'll talk about your new video, is in Isaiah 41. God says, "Hey, bring forth your proofs." I mean, he's calling out for proof and evidence like a court of law. So God's not scared of evidence. In fact, he calls us, and prophecy is one of the greatest evidences for the scripture being from him, for sure. And you document that on the site, which is awesome. But it comes down as well to Romans chapter 1, that this is a salvation issue, in that the creation itself bears witness to God's existence, his power and divine nature, enough so that those people who deny it, God says he has shown his existence to them through the creation, through the created world, whether it's astronomy or biology or etc., or just order. And it says enough that they are without excuse.
Yeah.
That they know in their heart of hearts that we didn't come from nothing, because that's illogical and impossible.
I'm happy to say, like, there's certain verses you hear when you're younger, you're growing, and I'm not the kind of person who would say either you believe it or you don't. I think if everyone's honest with themselves, there's certain parts where there's like a percentage of you and you're not quite sure. And that was one of those verses where I was like, really, are they without an excuse? They've been lied to so much. But after talking to them and after seeing how they respond and the answers that you give back, they really are willfully ignorant of the good stuff, the information, the truth. They turn a blind eye, and you hear some of the things they say, and you're like, I appeal to your reason. Like, let's talk about this and tell me why you think that. And usually they get a little bit sheepish and don't, because they want to accept what they have. They like it. They don't want to be accountable. They don't want, that's what it comes down to. And for me, I just wanted the truth no matter what it was, because it's logical. That's what lasts if it's
Yep.
the truth. So,
And I think as we get into this, I'm going to read the passage just for the sake of clarity, because we referenced it, but I want to read it verbatim. Romans 1:18, it says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth." Okay, so their unrighteousness is causing them to suppress the truth. And the word suppress here in Greek, it has this idea of, if you're in a swimming pool and you have a big beach ball and you're trying to hold it under the water, if you let go, it's going to pop up. It's going to naturally expose itself as coming up. But you have
yeah.
to actively push it down to keep it from coming up. And that's what the truth here is. It says, transitions in verse 19, "For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, specifically his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God, nor give him thanks, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. They claimed to be wise, but they became fools, and they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images, etc., etc." So the main thing here is that you have mankind willingly ignorant, suppressing this truth that is screaming of God's existence. And then you have atheists or others who sound really smart. They'll come and they'll cloak or wrap the truths of God, and they'll deflect it by coming up with various theories that you discuss. So in the film, so let's transition. This new film that you have, it's not very long, 21 minutes or so. Why did you create it, and kind of give us an overview?
I heard enough people say something about how everything arrived by a large explosion. And as a mechanic and a fabricator, I get so overwhelmed with how many things I want to express. And so this video is that. It's just, I can't even scratch the surface of them all. But it's like, okay, well, what are the odds of these things exploding from nothing? And let's crunch some numbers here. There's a guy, Spike Saris, who's done incredible videos. He's an astrophysicist who became a Christian because he sees all these things and he does the math, and he talks about this supposed dark matter and like just how many wrong turns they've taken in the scientific community to explain what they see, even though they can't see it, they can't test it. Like the Oort cloud or the Kuiper belt. There's like hardly anything in this supposed belt. We've never seen the Oort cloud. It's entirely theoretical. So is dark matter. So is inflation. Like, let's go and talk about the math of these orbits. Let's talk about angular momentum. Like, let's get into these things and find out what are the odds of that. Even if all the matter was here and you could somehow put a planet into motion, how hard it would be to do that. And I tried to do that very quickly and just, make the video entertaining enough to watch with cool images and stuff that are floating around out there. And some made myself with the new AI technology. But as you know, you got to be careful with this AI as well, because we use that for some of the massive math, but you really got to check all that because
Yeah, sometimes it has errors.
yeah, they're not, some of them aren't huge, but wrong is wrong. And that's why just, you got to check things. So
Yep.
yeah,
Well,
you got to be careful.
let's actually switch in, and we're gonna put the video right here, and so take a watch.
Water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. That's under the gentle crush of Earth's atmosphere, 14.7 pounds per square inch. It's a massive ocean of gases constantly pushing down on us. But climb to the summit of Mount Everest, the rooftop of the world, and that pressure drops to a mere 4.5 psi. Just like the ocean, there is far more pressure the lower you go. So, way up above the clouds and the densest part of the atmosphere, water doesn't need to reach 212 degrees to boil. It only needs to get to 157 degrees Fahrenheit, or 70 degrees Celsius. In fact, water will indeed boil at room temperature if the pressure is only about half a psi. Now let's leave Earth altogether with that in mind, and step into the silent vacuum of space, where pressure is practically non-existent. There, water boils at the frigid temperature of minus 155 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 100 degrees Celsius. And consider this. At our precise distance from the Sun, 93 million miles, anything exposed to direct sunlight reaches a blistering positive 250 degrees Fahrenheit, or 120 degrees Celsius. So ask yourself, what happens to the boiling point of water when you drop the pressure by a factor of 3, and then more than double the temperature, from minus 155 degrees Fahrenheit to positive 250 degrees Fahrenheit? It doesn't just boil. It erupts, violently vaporizing, then freezing in an instant, as it's blasted apart into its smallest molecules. It would be a stunning, chaotic display. Beautiful, terrifying, and utterly impossible to survive. And yet Earth is filled with water. Vast bodies and rivers inside the Earth, every ocean, every lake, even the air carries it. So we must ask, not only, how did it get here, but once it did, how could it possibly remain, without absolutely everything in place to protect it from day one? Because wherever it supposedly came from, comets, asteroids, the dusty void, none of those places can hold so much water like Earth does in one place. Not in these quantities, not in this balance, not with this precision. And yet, here it is. We can all agree the water is here. And not just a little, but a vast, planet-spanning abundance of about 1.4 billion cubic kilometers of it. So let's set aside, just for a moment, the fact that it is wildly unreasonable for such an enormous volume of deuterium-free water to exist on this one planet. Let's also ignore for now the devastating consequences life and water would face without the protection of Earth's magnetosphere and the ozone layer guarding us from the sun's relentless radiation. Because Earth does have a magnetosphere, a vast, invisible force field stretching tens of thousands of miles into space, deflecting deadly solar winds and cosmic rays, shielding every living thing. But here's something few people know. That shield is failing. The magnetosphere is decaying at an exponential rate, a loss of roughly 10% in just the past 180 years. Now, let's roll the clock backward. If we rewind time by just 15,000 years and return the field strength it would have lost by now, an increase of over 180,000%, what do we find? A planet trapped in a kind of electromagnetic oven. At that strength, the magnetic field wouldn't just shield from radiation, it would over-deflect it, disrupting solar cycles, causing unbearable cosmic ray penetration and wreaking havoc on the balance of space weather. Cellular biology would be under constant assault by extreme electromagnetic forces. Electric currents within Earth's crust and core would be magnified to such a degree that they could destabilize the very geology of the planet, triggering extreme volcanism, seismic chaos, and tectonic instability. Compass needles? Useless. Migratory species? Lost without orientation. Neural signals in living organisms? Drowned in magnetic interference too severe for brains or nerves to function. Yes, it's true that Earth's magnetic poles have flipped in the past. But contrary to hopeful speculation, there is zero evidence and no known physics suggesting the field gains energy from anything during a flip, or ever for that matter. Everything we observe tells us it has only ever weakened and will continue to do so, as it has for all of time. Because its decay is so steady and does not recharge, adding its strength back according to its decay rate complicates the idea that Earth's magnetic field could have been that powerful even as recently as 20,000 years ago. It defies physics. The energy output required would rival that of a neutron star, and Earth does not have the mass required to create a field of such enormous amounts of energy. Our field strength is just right, and doesn't have the physical nature to be as ancient as some forcefully postulate, in defiance of the data. And yet here we are, alive, protected, balanced on the edge of magnetic forces that shouldn't be sustainable over time, and yet somehow we are. It's a strange thing, that many can stomach the idea of life, in all its balance and complexity, emerging from billions of years of decay, but struggle to accept that it might have been designed. Whether it began 6,000 years ago, or 20 billion, the truth remains. Everything we see is a miracle when weighed against everything we know about science. Why is intelligent design in nature so hard to accept? When we, the natural beings ourselves, intelligently design things all the time. And yet, rather than submit to the idea of a higher intelligence, there are those who suggest that this entire universe, full of law, order, and breathtaking structure, probably came from a vast explosion, from nothing. They claim somehow that nothing, waited in no place where time did not exist, to allow for an unfathomably large probability to occur without a place or a single second of time to tick, so that nothing could explode into everything, and not just any explosion. An explosion with such unfathomable precision that it neither collapsed in on itself nor dispersed into the vast reaches of the universe too fast. According to Stephen Hawking, Alan Guth, and Roger Penrose, the odds of that perfect balance, where matter neither recollapsed nor dissipated, were approximately 1 part in 10 to the 60th power. That's a 1 followed by 60 zeros. And that number? It only accounts for the 5% of the universe we can see, not the other supposed 95% that evolutionary scientists claim exists as dark matter and dark energy, both completely invisible and unmeasurable, in order to account for all the other things we see in the universe which go directly against their evolutionary model. But science, true science, doesn't begin with speculation. It begins with measurement. The patchwork theory known as inflation tries to account for these mysteries, but it doesn't explain why space-time appears so perfectly flat, why the outer edges of galaxies spin too fast, or why the universe isn't just expanding, it's accelerating. By their models, none of this should be happening. Yet inflation is treated as fact, the reigning theory, even though it has no known cause and no working mechanism to achieve such an impossibility. Even still, inflation alone wasn't enough to save the failed theory. Now, to make the math work, there must also be dark matter and dark energy, invisible, untouchable, unmeasurable, making up the vast majority of the universe. Why? Because they've already decided. We must have come from an explosion of nothing. Even though the very scientists who laid the foundations of physics and astronomy, men of towering intellect, believed in a creator themselves. They didn't force the data to match a godless paradigm. They believed in a God of order, and used that understanding to discover what could actually be tested and measured. It was under that premise they made groundbreaking discoveries. Not by chasing the wind of wishful thinking and concocting theories hidden behind smoke and mirrors, which can never be tested or verified, but by seeking to understand the thinking behind the design and finding the precision in every place we turn our attention to. As the famous Johannes Kepler said when studying science, "I am thinking God's thoughts after him." It would seem that there are indeed two invisible forces at work when it comes to why the hearts of men search for any other answer as to our cause of being, rather than a creator. One, a deep desire to dissolve moral accountability. Do whatever you please, there is no God who judges. And the other, which is like the first, the simple refusal to be told what one can or cannot do from a higher power. Often, both of these sentiments are well funded by those with similar desires of being their own God, rather than submitting to one. As the saying goes, nearly all scientists agree with those who sign their checks. Even with all of these shakiest of foundations being treated as settled facts, without cause, without mechanism, without reason, somehow everything exploded from nothing, at just the right rate. And the four fundamental forces of physics, the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, gravity and electromagnetism, all happen to exist in perfect harmony, and to a very precise value of strength. So precise, in fact, that if any one of them had been altered by the tiniest degree, the result would be utter chaos. No galaxies, no stars, no planets, and no life. Let's set aside for a moment the claim that 95% of the universe is made of unseen and unmeasurable material, and instead focus on just the 5% of visible matter, the stuff we can actually observe. Even that, just that 5%, demands a cosmic explosion of unimaginable precision. As it was just mentioned, physicists calculate that in order for all matter in the universe to exist as it does, the energy of that initial blast, what they call the Big Bang, had to be fine-tuned to 1 × 10⁻60th power. But it gets worse. Roger Penrose estimated that the entropy of the early universe had to be fine-tuned to an even more absurd degree, which is written simply as 1 × 10 × 10⁻123rd power. To give you an idea of the size of these numbers, estimated grains of sand on Earth, roughly 10 to the 20th power. Stars in the observable universe, roughly 10 to the 24th power. Atoms in the universe, roughly 10 to the 80th power. Penrose's number is not 10 to the 123rd power, it is 10 × 10 to the 123rd power. If every atom in the observable universe was a typewriter, and each typewriter typed 1 trillion zeros per second, every second for 13.8 billion years, you'd have to repeat that process a Google times. You would finally reach the size of this number, and the level of fine-tuning it would take to perfectly set the entropy of the early universe. And remember, this was only talking about the 5% of matter we can see and test. And yet, we just ignore that. Just like we ignore the fact that we still can't see the ends of the universe. We actually have no idea how big the universe really is. And just like we ignore the so-called young galaxies, we observe sitting at the very edge of what we can see, galaxies that shouldn't be there if deep time models were true. All of it, extremely hard on the current theories, all of it, extremely inconvenient. So, continuing on with these statistics, we will only focus on just that 5%, and only that first value of the precision of the Big Bang, 1 × 10 to the 60th power. Let's try to understand the size of this number and put these odds into some sort of understandable perspective. Let's talk probability. 1 chance in 10 to the 50th power is already considered statistically impossible in physics and mathematics, and 1 chance in 10 to the 100th power is considered a mathematical zero, no chance at all. Imagine dropping 100 coins at once. The odds of all 100 landing heads up, roughly 1 in 1.27 × 10 to the 30th power. That's already absurd. You'd have a better chance of winning the Powerball lottery 10 times in a row, and even if you dropped 100 coins every single second, since the supposed beginning of the universe, 13.8 billion years ago, you would still almost certainly never be close to seeing it happen. And yet, the odds we're being asked to accept for the Big Bang are drastically worse. 30 orders of magnitude worse. Let's keep going, not forgetting all the impossible odds we've already covered, but setting them aside for a moment so we can examine some other extremely critical facts. After this supposed explosion of nothing came everything. And somehow, it all flew outward at precisely the right pace, with a mysterious burp of inflation from an unknown and unthinkable cause. And just like that, the cosmos was filled with a flat space-time continuum, stars, gases, and a fully stocked periodic table. These gases, instead of dispersing outward into equilibrium as all gases naturally do, somehow reversed course. They began to attract each other and formed the very first stars. Except, there's yet another problem, besides defying the laws of thermodynamics. A massive problem. Every current theory of star formation requires that stars already exist. This doesn't answer the cause, it simply moves it down the line and hopefully right off the stage and out from under the limelight. They are attempting to explain how the first stars formed, while relying on models that require stars to be there before stars existed. A cosmic chicken and egg dilemma. And yet this glaring contradiction is rarely, if ever, mentioned. But we'll ignore that too, so we can move on to planets. Supposedly, the newly formed stars were soon orbited by clumps of matter that somehow formed planets, which just happened to find themselves at just the right distances, with just the right momentum to fall into stable orbits. Is it too early to mention that if Earth gained or lost a few hundred miles per hour, life would end almost immediately? We'll get there. But here's something you can observe today. Every planet in our solar system orbits the Sun in the same direction that the Sun spins, and they all orbit within a common, nearly flat plane, like a vast cosmic merry-go-round disk. That sounds simple enough, but the math is not. You don't have to dig too deep to discover that the accepted model of solar system formation doesn't hold up under the smallest scrutiny. They claim the Sun formed, dust clumped, clumps formed planetesimals, and boom, a solar system. But how is that actually possible? Well, with everything we understand and have verified about momentum, it isn't. According to the law of conservation of angular momentum, anything ejected from a rotating body should retain that body's spin pattern. And yet, here's what they won't tell you. The Sun holds 98% of the solar system's mass. But the planets? They hold 98% of the solar system's angular momentum. That's not just a small problem. That's a fatal contradiction. That's because when two bodies of vastly different mass are spinning together and then separated, the heavier mass should retain most of the spin. But in our solar system, it's the opposite. The massive Sun barely spins, while the lighter planets are racing. That's not just unexpected, it's backwards. And yet, our current explanation requires the solar system to begin with a spinning dust cloud, orbiting around a newly forming Sun, which, oddly enough, needed other stars to have formed the Sun in the first place, stars that conveniently no longer exist. This cloud of dust was somehow able to spin down the Sun, while simultaneously spinning up the planets. And all of this while arranging them neatly in a perfectly flat orbital plane, landing them in insanely precise orbits. In the vacuum of space, where there's very little space clutter to disrupt the orbit of a planet, we're told this all happened naturally. And yet, as I briefly mentioned earlier, if Earth's orbital velocity were altered by just a few hundred miles per hour, our orbit would catastrophically destabilize in a matter of only thousands of years. We desperately need our orbit to be exactly 66,616.16 miles per hour. So, thank bang for that. But let's not stop there. Why does Venus rotate the opposite direction of Earth? Why is Uranus tilted off-axis, spinning 98 degrees on its side? Why does Triton, a moon of Neptune, orbit in the entirely wrong direction, as well as spin the wrong way along with 8 other major moons? And let's not even get started on the short-period comets locked in unstable orbits, orbits that couldn't possibly last more than 10,000 years. All supposedly sourced from the entirely theoretical Oort cloud. That's right, the Oort cloud has never been seen. It was simply invented as a much-needed rescue device to explain why these comets still exist, because deep time scenarios simply can't account for them. The same is true for the infamous yet underwhelming Kuiper belt, which lacks anywhere near the material required to explain the comets we can actually observe. It's like walking into a garage and saying, "Aha! This is where all the cars on the freeway were built," even though there are only 3 tires and a lawnmower. What we find in this belt is embarrassingly undersupplied. Nevertheless, the theories prevail, because, as they say, we know it happened. Dust formed, dust bumped into dust, dust became clumps, clumps bumped into clumps, and somehow formed planets, even though, after a certain size, space rocks don't stick together. They shatter one another. They don't form bigger ones, any more than shooting lots of bullets into the air will eventually result in cannonballs forming. And yet, somehow just enough of them survived to bind together and form worlds. In Earth's case, a planet with a molten iron core, generating a magnetic field so perfectly tuned that it shields us from the Sun's constant assault of coronal mass ejections, solar energetic particles, galactic cosmic rays, X-rays, ultraviolet radiation, and microwaves. It is very fortunate that we are stuck to this particular rock, which just happens to be spinning at the perfect speed of 1,000 miles per hour, and orbiting the Sun at just the right rate, in a beautifully circular path, not elliptical, which would either fry us or freeze us to death. Thank bang for that precision, or else we'd all be goners. Oh, and Earth also just happens to be tilted at 23.5 degrees, giving us seasons, swirling the tides and stabilizing our climate. Without that precise tilt, we'd degrade into climate chaos in just 75 years. And it would only get worse from there. We wouldn't even last hundreds of years. Again, as stated before, if Earth's orbital velocity were altered by just a few hundred miles per hour, our orbit would catastrophically destabilize in a matter of only thousands of years. Want to check these numbers for yourself? You no longer need to be a polymath. Go ask an AI engine. Run the math. Even though modern AI has been trained to accept the evolutionary paradigm, it can still give you honest calculations. And when it does, check the numbers. See for yourself. In the past 200 years, it would seem that the desire to deny a creator for the purpose of moral freedom has taken quite a foothold and is thriving in our society. But as for those who just want to know the truth, see the honest data, and are willing to consider the entire equation without fudged numbers or biased inputs crafted to force a desired outcome. The truth is impossible to hide, and the math doesn't lie, if you're just willing to sit down and work it out. In the next video, we'll be looking at the complexity of microbiology, where the odds of life spontaneously coming into existence get even worse. As usual, like and subscribe so you won't miss it.
All right, well, welcome back. Hopefully you are inspired and intrigued by all the stuff that Sean has put in there. I mean, Sean, I think as we mentioned earlier before the video, this is about probability. And these are numbers that are relatively inconceivable to the human brain. Would you agree?
Totally. And some people don't understand about scientific notation that each time you add a digit, like 1 times 10 to the 23rd, you're multiplying it. When you go from the 23rd to the 24th, you're multiplying that number again 10 times each time you go up a digit. So like when you start getting into these massive numbers, I'm trying to use examples to give you an idea, like the typewriters, all typing, all the zeros every second. It's just like, it's beyond preposterous. It's absurd. So there's that.
And the lottery, I thought the lottery one was very good too, because we know how hard it is to win the lottery once.
Yeah.
In the sense of the big mother ball or whatever it is, but to do it over and over and over and over, we look at that and we'd say that's not even possible. Okay, that's not even realistic. We'll say it that way. Of course, mathematically, we could talk about possibility, but what we're saying here, I think for me is, listen, human. Okay, hopefully a thinking human. When you look at all the things, and you just touched on the surface in 20 minutes, you could do 20 hours on this. And your website has all that. But hey, look, in a snapshot, don't bet your eternal destiny on the fact of evolution or atheism or that we all came from nothing, because that is a bet that you're going to lose. And you would be, like the scripture says, you would be foolish to bet your eternal destiny on something that is absolutely unfathomably impossible based on math.
Yeah, and it's just example after example. Each thing that you look at, you can't cover them all. So I just don't know why people are okay accepting that. And very smart people too. They do not want, well, there's no God, so we have to find a reason to not have that, because it's just unacceptable to me. I don't want some God who they have these opinions about. And I've met a lot of them. It's usually massive anger issues. Quite a lot of them have bad relationships with their fathers, to tell you the truth. You have a problem with some father out there telling you what you can and can't do. And it really does come down to that. And if you go watch that video Ben Stein did, No Intelligence Allowed, he goes to these organizations and he asks the questions we're all thinking. And the answers, you just got to hear it for yourself from their mouths, because you're just like, that must be what they're saying. And then when they actually say it out loud, you're like, I still can't believe you're okay with that. Like, what in the world? How can you do that as a scientific person who's trying to follow the scientific method for the purpose of accuracy and truth, how are you going so darn wrong? It's just inexcusable. It's not science.
So let's okay. What is science?
It's a great question. I've got 2 videos for you to watch. They're on the website, the first creation
Okay,
page.
good. Okay.
Yeah, so it's supposed to be measurement. You can't do science without measurement, and you have to be honest. Like you're not actually doing science until you measure something. That's what it comes down to. But you got to be honest. And the scientific method, excuse me, was developed to keep people honest. They're supposed to follow that. And if too many things go against their hypothesis, you're supposed to go back to the drawing board and start again. But these guys will actually say, nah, there's got to be an Oort cloud, even though we can't see it or test it. So we're just going to keep going with that theoretical reason. And it's the amount of times that they've done that and accept it and repeat it, because people don't check this stuff. They're not scientists. They hear it from the scientists. And every documentary I watch, they say, isn't it amazing that this evolved into this state? And I'm like, how can anyone even just watching it? Like, because like what you said about the beach ball, I'm watching the stuff that they're showing me on these, and they're saying all these lies about it, but I can't. It's like the beach ball's popping out on them while they're doing it, and you're just like, you're saying what you're saying, but
they're pushing down. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Don't look at that. The truth is popping up.
Yeah, I'm just like, at least I can still see that, but I still just can't. I wish that they could open their eyes and just look at the glory all around us and say, wow, this is incredible design, and give credit where credit is due. Like, I wouldn't want to like build some amazing car and then someone say, wow, I can't believe that arrived by chance. The guy who built it is like, I put a lot of time into that. I thought about that a lot. Designed, it's exact. And the next video is all about the biological side of things. So like looking in that little microcosmos, and Darwin thought like the cell was the simplest building block, but it is an incredible factory, data born that came from nowhere, from an explosion of nothing. Holy moly. Like, wait till you see all those little machines that just process things at mind-bending speeds.
So on that note, we have the first video kind of did a lot of physics. What are the next 2 videos?
Yeah, the next one is all biology. We're going to go up from the primordial soup and talk about what are the odds of forming just one amino acid out of all the available ones. And it's got to be chirality is the word that they use, which means left-handedness and right-handedness. These are not the same. They're mirror images of each other, and that's how amino acids are. And all of life is all left-handed amino acids. You don't get a mixture until something's dying. And once you have the mixture, it kills whatever's there. So like you go up through all that and okay, so what are the odds of this forming? What do you need? We talk about the Miller-Urey experiment and what they did, like actually to make that happen, they had to freeze it. First they made it. What they made was useless. And as soon as it existed, they froze it. They like turned down the oxygen. They cranked up all the other gases.
You mean intelligent contributions?
Yes, exactly. We're going to.
So it wasn't completely random then.
No, it's like you guys are proving no intelligent design was by intelligently designing this.
Yep.
They did a great job proving the opposite, but yet it's still in books. They're like, oh, we can make this happen. It's totally plausible. Like, well, let's go look at the math. Let's go do some odds again. And we're going to go every rung all the way up past the cell into the human body. And then after that, the next video is prophecies and Jesus.
Excellent.
So,
well, what you see is, and you see this not only in the physics area, again, as you know, we love astronomy and other things, but the desperation that you have of humanity, starting with the presupposition that, well, the one thing that we know that it can't be or that it won't be is God. Okay, so therefore, once you remove that out of the equation, then the desperation comes in and you come up with all these theories, dark energy, dark matter, and then you start with those presuppositions minimizing those things that you don't like. But again, science, we heard this even with COVID, follow the science, follow the science, follow the science, as if science was a God, but that these same people we're not really meaning follow the science, which is again based on empirical, repeatable evidence and experiments and data. What they were saying is follow the consensus of
Yeah,
the scientists. That's what they
massively.
really meant, and don't challenge it. There was a book that came out years ago. I don't remember the author, but I remember the name. It was called like Tornado in a Junkyard, and what he said was he was looking at life and life coming from non-life, and he said it would be easier. Now it would be easier for a tornado to go through a junkyard, and if all the material was there, and bring together out the other side in flight, like put it together in
Yeah.
flight as a Boeing 747 jet. So he goes, it's easier for that to happen than for life to start by chance in randomness.
Yeah, use
And
that example in the next video too.
good,
Yeah.
because it was powerful for me as a young Christian to go, okay, where am I at in my rational thinking? And you see something like that. Well, again, it was based on probability and odds. And again, the point was, hey, it's if you are willing to believe that a tornado would do that, it's easier for that to happen than for life. So if you can't believe that a tornado would do that, then you certainly cannot believe that life could, even hypothetically or probability wise, come out from non-life. Zero.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm no expert either. Like, I'm interested by this stuff. I really do love it. And there's so many good people out there who've put amazing things forward, like Dr. Grady McMurtry or Kent Hovind or in Prophecy, Bill Sallis, like all these guys. And they're, I can see it. I'm not like, I have a brain that works. I can reason, I can look at it. It's logical. And if it's a cause and effect world, if everybody's being honest, you can be like, okay, well, what was the cause? This is the size of the cause. This is the size of the effect. This is why. You examine both and kind of like check your answers forward and backwards that way. You can do that with everything. And there's no reason everyone can't do that. You know?
Absolutely.
I mean, as long as I got a brain, 2 ears, and some eyes, maybe even
Yep.
just one of those.
And that's really what we're doing. That's the whole point of this video is to again to introduce people to your website, ithasbeenwritten.com. People can check it out for sure. But also, we're appealing for people to use their brain, their rational thinking, to be honest with the data, to be honest with the material, to be honest with the math. Yes, this is why so many scientists have gone over to intelligent design. That maybe they're not fully a Christian in the way that we'd understand, but they're honest enough to say, look, like Michael Behe in his books, he's a biochemist. He's
Yeah.
like, I have to stop denying what I see in the bio molecular world. There's no way this can happen without some sort of intelligent designer. I'm not saying I'm a Bible believing Christian, but nevertheless, there is an honesty there, which I appreciate. Any final thoughts, Sean?
Yeah. Well, my dad used to always say to me growing up, whenever I tried to dismiss my effort through a theological, well, I'm here, if it's the truth, it'll come to me sort of thing. I can just walk into whatever's coming. And my dad always looked right at me as a doctor and he'd say, well, God gave you a brain and he expects you to use it. So start thinking.
Start thinking.
I guess he did. Yeah. It's pretty solid philosophy.
Well, and this is where if you go to Romans 1, continue on Romans 1:24, God gave them up and to a debased mind because they made these moral choices to reject God and to replace him with something else, which in this case was the God of randomness, which we know, again, go into a junkyard or go to a lumber yard, put a whole bunch of explosive, blow it up and see if what comes out afterwards is a house put together. I mean,
Yep.
it's absolutely, it's stupid and ridiculous. But yet these so-called very, very smart people, they still cling to this fairy tale. And
Yeah.
that's why the Bible says, professing themselves to be wise and smart, they became foolish.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that. It's a slippery slope. You can be debased in your thinking. You can become calloused. The more you sin, the more you sin. Like, you got to watch it. You got to use your head. You got to try and stay on the innocent side of life and don't let a little bit in because it just gets worse like a cancer. And this is no different. Like you're thinking, you have to watch us. Us people are so easily fooled. So
Yeah. Amen. Well,
don't
Sean,
be fooled.
appreciate your time. It's been good chatting again. And everybody, ithasbeenwritten.com. Check it out. And I hope you enjoyed the video. There's so much at Sean's site, so check it out there. And we look forward to having him back on when he gets the other 2 videos coming out, which we will. So thanks for watching today. Again, use your brain. That's a great way to say it. Use the brain that God gave you, because you know what? When you truly research it out, we did not come from a big blob of nothing, because even that doesn't, anybody knows that doesn't make any sense at all. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.
Prophecy Watchers is a viewer-supported ministry made possible through the faithful support of friends like you. You can give easily by visiting prophecywatchers.com.